Well, we've been talking a whole lot about politics, and for good reason. We're going to continue to talk about Trump and how he's rolling out his new administration and Democrats as they seek to rebuild their party and they seek to identify the leaders that will lead them in the midterm elections that will be coming up in 2 years and the next presidential election. Well, we're going to take a little break from the news of politics today. We're going to talk about sports. We're going to talk about culture. A former professional basketball player, Jasmine Maietta, is going to join us. Jasmine turned entrepreneur and has had some pretty big jobs with some really big sports brands and other brand companies, brands that you will recognize. But she is now out on her own. She has started a sports lifestyle brand that she says amplifies expression and connection for sports fans everywhere. Going to be talking to Jasmine and the work that she does with underrepresented artists to bridge the gap between culture and the commercialization that she says is pretty apparent in the world of sports. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for joining us in this hour. Talk about your career. I mean, you've had an exciting career as a professional basketball player, then you've worked at some major corporations, that have obviously have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening around the sports world as well as pop culture. So talk a little about your beginnings as a basketball player.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a ride. I started as an athlete and I still feel like I am. I played basketball growing up in small town Oklahoma and went on to play collegiately and then professionally overseas in Spain, and recognized the power of sport, then early in my career, to continue to drive people together, which was really an important value I had always had in my personal life. And really wanted to go out and build a career where I could be close to sport or points of sweat, and was able to do that. I spent my first few years as a coach, a very natural transition from playing to leading marketing at Reebok, right as Adidas had acquired them, which was a great understanding of kind of brand segmentation, and two brands that used to compete now being one. And then went to Hasbro right as the iPhone came out, which is, for other generations, unreal to think about. But they wanted to translate the games that they had, Monopoly, Trivial Pursuit, to the digital first generation. And so that was a great experience that made me understand I love sports, and went back to it at Under Armour, where I led marketing for 6 years, the men's training business, running and connected footwear, and then spent time at Peloton as VP of Global Brand. And so always around sports culture, points of sweat, really understanding the power that sports has to bring people together, but actually recognize that as an industry, it defaults to the uniform. As much as it celebrates bringing people together, it defaults to all of us being the same. And I personally wanting to celebrate the differences, and saw that as an opportunity, which led me to start my own platform around sports and inclusivity and identity, which is Round 21.
So what exactly does your platform do? Or, how does it speak to sports fans?
Yeah, so we are a culture-driven product platform for sports, and every word there is intentional. We have a business model that empowers and prioritizes the people who play and the people who celebrate every play on the court. Those are the fans. The industry traditionally prioritizes the team or the league, and we've flipped that on its head. And in partnership with independent artists and in partnership with sports teams, leagues, and athletes, we bridge those two parts of the sports culture and bring new ideas and empower messages that are happening in society through the lens of sports. So that when a fan goes to a New York Liberty game or to an Oklahoma City Thunder game, they can say something about who they are through their passion for sports. They don't have to just conform to the identity of the team.
So we know that sports figures like Magic Johnson and others played a real big role in this last presidential election. We saw many of them. I think Kamala Harris had a Athletes for Harris. She did a whole rollout with athletes from all kinds of different sports teams that were out talking to young voters, in particular, talking to sports fans. We know that Donald Trump ran a lot of transgender ads, demeaning transgender people during major games. So like during, primetime games on weekends and throughout the week. I think this ad saying that Kamala Harris agreed with transgender surgery being provided to individuals in the military was played tens of thousands of times. And some people point to that ad as one of the reasons that they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. What do you make about how sports and games and major sports figures have been so central in politics, in particular in this election?
Yeah, so sports has always been a platform to spread messages. And this goes back in my personal experience back to, Muhammad Ali and his perspective on societal views and views around political decisions and using his platform to make everybody know where he stood. Fast forward to today, sports is one of the very, very few tune-in moments left in media as everybody's cutting cords, and there are so many other ways to consume different forms and formats of media. Sports, because of its live base and its, frankly, you just never know what's going to happen. Character continues to drive that tune-in value. And so it's a platform on steroids relative to where it used to be. And, in addition, every team, player, owner is encouraged to or expected to use their platform, their microphone to express how they feel about what's happening in the world.
Well, let me ask you, some players we heard say, no, I don't do politics. I don't get into politics. Whereas we saw others, some wearing MAGA hats during press conferences. And like I said, others like Magic Johnson and others speaking out and showing up in support of Kamala Harris at rallies. So you think, what are your thoughts on that, on players taking a position for or against a candidate?
Yeah, I think that they have the right to. They're citizens first. We actually, when I was at Peloton, the Peloton instructors, while I was at Peloton, had an election while we were there. And we talked a lot about that and how players, even employees, they are citizens first, and they have the right to do that. I think the landscape this election, which very clearly represented geography perspectives on Trump versus Harris, sports teams and owners are often aligned to a political party, whether or not they're voicing it or not, just simply because of the fan base that they sit in. The fans sometimes amplify that. The reality is when you see things like the WNBA players rallying and, the election that, impacted Warnock, and how players, even with Round 21 as a startup, chose our vote T, which was symbolic around how many women didn't vote in the last election, and how women in particular with the 19th Amendment and so much of the empowerment of the WNBA should feel responsible for using their voice. Athletes did choose what we were saying through our product platform to represent the importance of voting. And that microphone is available to athletes. And I think even after the election, via social media, athletes were getting kind of called out. How could you? Why would you? And I think they're feeling very comfortable explaining why. And I think this is a very nuanced result of the election, to which you've been so pointed to point out. There are obvious implications to human rights that are going to potentially come out of this election. And some of that's just going to have to unfold in the next 4 years, or hopefully not. Hopefully not. I'm always an optimistic person, and, we'll hope for the best.
Are there pressures placed on players not to come out and support a particular candidate? So we know the shut up and dribble, we don't want to hear from you on politics. But then you have these owners, billionaire owners, 99% white male billionaire owners, who traditionally are more Republican and are going to be more supportive of Republican candidates. We saw Mark Cuban obviously supporting Kamala Harris, but quickly, seemingly, kissing the ring to Donald Trump. These are folks who make their money and they would probably say they benefit more under a Republican administration or under a Donald Trump administration. So what pressure is there on the players when you have these billionaire white male owners who are closely aligned with Donald Trump? And we've seen this when he was in office before. And you have these teams, particularly in football, that are like 99% Black men. It's just the dichotomy, the optics on that could not be more glaring.
No, actually, in talking to some athletes, whether it's the election or not, the pressure for athletes today is coming at them from all angles, both from the pressure to perform on the court or the field, as well as social media pressure to stay engaged with their fan base, from brands wanting to continue to exploit, their name, image, and likeness oftentimes, and then the pressure in this case of don't say the wrong thing, or if I don't say anything, what does that mean? And I think increasingly athletes are surrounding themselves with people that they trust and understand what's, the bigger picture for what they're trying to build, and encourage them to 100% be authentic and honest with who they are and what they do. And, it wasn't that long ago that Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee and did stand for something that he believed in, and is, in my opinion, on the other side of history, benefiting from taking his personal stand in what he thought was right for him personally. And that, I think,
you may say he's benefiting, but some would say he paid the ultimate price of being banned from the sport. And others who wanted to support him, I would suspect, were, their speech was chilled. If you saw what happened to him, there were a lot of people who I'm certain were discouraged from taking any kind of position.
Yeah, when I say benefiting, I mean, he can sleep at night knowing that he took the stand that he believed in and that was authentic to what he believed in. And I've had the privilege of talking to Colin on one occasion and gave him a tremendous amount of credit for representing what the platform of sport has as a platform for athletes to express ideas that can have societal change. That's really the decision that an athlete gets the opportunity to make, is they can make the decisions that they have on the court or field, and that can inspire a generation. They can make decisions that happen on a quarter field and off that can inspire a generation in a different way. But staying true to who you are and making sure that you're not making the decision for someone else is certainly, I think, more in the front of athletes' minds than it's ever been, just simply because of the scrutiny that they are under for an inauthentic move to really, have the most unintended consequence.
But you hear a lot of athletes, some say they don't want to be role models. Like, they want to just play their sport and they don't want the pressure of having to be perfect and, having to live a certain kind of lifestyle that would be, consistent with someone who is a positive role model. And I've heard athletes say, look, I don't study politics. I don't watch, the cable news shows. I don't read politics every day. And it's not fair for people to expect me, I've heard athletes say this, to weigh in, in these very, very charged political waters, because if I do say something that's, quote unquote, offensive to someone, or I get a fact wrong, I'm going to be canceled. The cancel culture is real. What do you say to those athletes? I
think that is a choice. That's a conscious choice for them not to say something, but it needs to be made in the context of if they've had a point of view on everything else, and now this is something they don't have a point of view on, that is something that is inauthentic to their relationship with their community. And hero worship in sports has been around since the dawn of time, or the dawn of sports, and that comes with the territory. I think increasingly athletes are more and more media trained and getting a sense of self that they are building. And so when these moments come, they have that intentional approach that has place that moment. And that's really the opportunity. And, now since, the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, some of these elite athletes are getting media trained because they're on overtime or they're playing on other leagues and have microphones in front of them.
Well, why do you think the WNBA in 2020 took such a positive stand on social justice issues, but we didn't see the male-dominated or male-run leagues do the same?
They followed, actually. They eventually did. They eventually did Black Lives Matter T-shirts on sidelines in almost every sport. They followed the WNBA. And in my opinion, that's because the WNBA had courage that was way before 2020. If you look back, 2016, 2017, 2018, NECA, the president of the WNBPA, they were the players under, I feel like, her leadership and just this generation understood that their platform was to empower voices that weren't often heard. And that's kind of comes with the territory of women's sports. You have the U.S. Women's National Team and the U.S. Women's National Players Association that Round 21 has partnerships with, and the WNBA Players Association. And what's remarkable about those associations under their leadership is the intention to make change or impact through sports that has impact across multiple leagues and multiple tiers of sports. And when the equal pay amendment and adjustment was made for the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, there was a reverberation that was felt across all of the female leagues. And you see Professional Women's Hockey League coming up, you see Unrivaled, and there's just this empowering spirit that kind of comes with the territory of being a female athlete now. And the WNBA has been leading that charge for over a decade.
Yeah, when we come forward, we'll talk about transgender issues and athletes, because again, that played heavily in this election. Ads ran during the World Series and other, big sporting events, trying to send the message that if you elect Kamala Harris, you are supporting transgender athletes, boys playing women's sports. We've been seeing Colin Allred, who's a former football player, professional football player, who's running for Senate in Texas, come out and says he didn't agree with transgender girls playing sports with girls. Jasmine, the issue of transgender athletes played heavily in this election. I'm going to read something from Representative Seth Moulton. He is a congressman from Boston. He is defending controversial remarks that he made about transgender athletes in the wake of the presidential election. President-elect Donald Trump's campaign spent millions on anti-trans political ads this fall. The Massachusetts Congressman Moulton told the New York Times after Trump's win that Democrats spend way too much time trying not to offend anyone and called for a new approach from the party on the transgender issues. He said, "I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that." He went on to say on CNN, "Look, I was just speaking authentically as a parent about one of many issues where Democrats are just out of touch with the majority of Americans. And I stand by my position, even though I may not have used exactly the right words." He said, despite the public backlash, the vast majority of feedback he's received has been incredibly supportive. He said, fellow Democrats and congressional colleagues have told him, "You're exactly right, Seth. This is our problem. We try to cancel people rather than actually have debates about issues that Americans care about." He says he stands by them because he's trying to raise the debate on a contentious issue. He had a handful of trans activists and anti-war protesters gathered outside his office on Veterans Day, and others told local media that they were outraged by his comments. So what do you make? I mean, transgender people make up probably less than 1% of this population. So transgender athletes probably make up even, less than that, obviously less than that 1%, but yet they became a central theme in the election with those millions and millions of dollars being spent by Trump. And apparently those ads, according to a lot of people, really resonated with people. What is your take on this whole transgender issue? Well, as it relates to athletes.
Yeah, this is a very, very complex and very important issue. And, as a brand that believes in inclusivity and celebrating differences, it's a crucial issue to treat with empathy and respect for all perspectives. Personally, I think everyone deserves the opportunity to participate in sports. No one is debating that, from what I can tell. And I recognize the need for fairness and competition. This feels like it's going to be a quite lengthy debate or discussion within the zeitgeist, and governing bodies will get involved and experts will get involved and solutions will come to light that are broad sweeping. I hope that we uphold inclusivity and fairness for all athletes, which is what we would focus on. And regardless of what happens, round 21 will foster a sense of belonging and celebrate the diversity of the entire sports community. You know, I look behind you and see the framed magazine cover, I believe, of, you know, with autism. And I have a niece who has autism. And these are very personal issues that when it goes from somebody's personal lifestyle and choice to being a political debate topic, that's just that's a very like long, distant place from where it starts with people, which is very personal. And so it's hard for me to comment directly on where this will go.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you had the experience as a former professional basketball player? Now, before you were professional, you were amateur. Have you had the experience of playing with a transgender basketball player?
I've had the experience of watching and cheering for Laisha Clarendon, who was a WNBA player for 12 years, who just retired this year, who identifies as transgender and non-binary. She, he, they, right? Those are common vernaculars. Laisha chose they and uses he, him, and has been playing in the WNBA for 12 years. She, in her transition, was the first active WNBA player to have top surgery.
So let's be clear. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Laisha. Laisha was formerly male, born as a boy.
No, born as a. But you asked specifically, has there been a transgender in my experience? So no, born as a woman and uses he, him.
Oh, okay. So Laisha was born as a girl.
Yeah.
Female girl, and then transitioned to a male.
Correct. But it's still, I mean, we're talking about a similar, you know.
So where does Laisha play? Does Laisha play does she play in the WNBA or the NBA?
WNBA. I'm sharing my personal experience of someone that I've cheered for and been inspired by, who identifies as transgender. It's not the topic that the media is discussing, which is men transitioning to a woman and playing in women's leagues, but it is an experience of somebody who went through a very, in my opinion, private experience and inspired a generation and inspired playing at the top of their game, and has been a leader in the WNBA social justice initiatives and a passionate advocate for gender expression in sports.
Let me ask you this. When Laisha obviously started in WNBA, she went by, she identified as a lady.
I don't know actually when she started. I actually don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Okay. And maybe Robert, you can find that out for us. But at some point, she started identifying as male and started using pronouns he and him.
Yes.
And while doing so, she continued to play with women in the WNBA.
Correct.
And do you know, I know you don't know her whole history, but do you know, like, how was she received by players on her team and then others in the league?
I can't speak,
because we're going to call.
I can't speak to that, but I know he inspired a generation simply because of the authenticity and bravery. And maybe I'm speaking personally, but we actually commemorated Laisha on a product that is still available in conjunction with other players. And to us, that was so symbolic and representative. And it's not about gender identity. It's about players in the league who have, by being great in their own way, inspired this generation to continue to be great. And I was really proud that we included, you know, a variety of players, those who have, Sue Bird is on that ball and Laisha's on that ball.
So have you seen, Robert's giving us some history. Apparently, Laisha was drafted in 2013 and she played for the Atlanta Dream. She was named a 2017 All-Star, Connecticut Sun, New York Liberty, Minnesota Lynx before finishing her career with the Sparks. She helped negotiate a historic collective bargaining agreement, which included salary increases. So obviously she was very active with the WNBA beyond just playing and winning championships. She was involved in helping to get parity and negotiate better. There's no parity between what the women are paid and the men, but getting some better contracts, obviously, for WNBA players. But Laisha, as you said, started her career, and now we know, as a female in the WNBA. Have you had the experience of playing with someone, and what these ads were about a person who's born as a boy or has the biological features of a male person, and then they transition to female? And now you have perhaps the build, the height, the speed, the strength that is associated with male persons playing in a league where you have female persons who perhaps don't have the same, body type, strength, speed, agility, etc.
I have not had that experience personally. I also think when we are defining someone by their biological, I'm not qualified to speak on that. That's where I think it gets difficult as the public to weigh in on this, because it's a private situation, and then we're talking about like governance changing at league and team levels, which is something.
So I guess I'm just asking you more about. Okay, I asked you, had you seen it? So no. Fair enough, you haven't. But where do you see sports going in that direction? More, that is your expertise. You study sports, you study their trends. So do you see the trend being with teams allowing transgender players? Say the example I gave, where somebody's born as a male person, can you envision that person who transitions to a female being able to get drafted and have a spot on the WNBA team?
I honestly have no idea what could or would happen, but when you think back in history and how what they were born as being a limit, my family identifies as Sikh. My brother wore a turban, still does wear a turban, and wasn't allowed to play basketball. And we were born and raised in small town Oklahoma. Now that would be considered extremely racist and extremely, counter, hopefully, to how people being given access should be considered. But I don't know where this is going to end up. I certainly know that as the founder of a brand that celebrates inclusivity, we're going to be curious, and we're going to celebrate a place where everybody can come together and feel like they belong through sports in a way like we don't have a play on this because we don't represent opportunities to actually get a jersey and go play. But I understand that it's a very important topic in sports and will continue to be.
So you think Representative Moulton from Massachusetts got it wrong when he said that Democrats are getting this wrong, that we're out of touch, we're out of pace with where America is on this issue, and that he worries about his little girls playing sports with someone who was born male and transitions to female? Do you think he gets it wrong, that we're not out of touch, that people who identify as Democrats like myself are not out of touch on this issue?
I think that the idea of identity and representation and participation as your authentic self is something that is a national issue that people have very personal connections to, whether they are, in today's world, Jewish, trans, Black, white. And I think singling out trans as a specific segment to limit opportunities or what was a political play. I think there's more dialogue that needs to happen regarding, is there an opportunity for transgender athletes to play in sports? That is a very specific issue that is very complex, but it was used as a chip in this election when, in fact, identity in general, regardless of how you identify, was an overarching theme of this election.
Before I let you go, Jasmine, tell us more about your company, how people can find you on social media, your website.
Yeah, so we are Round 21 is our Instagram, which is the way to keep the finger on the pulse of what we're doing. We just came off of an incredible LA Clippers experience, Somos Clippers representing the Hispanic and Latin community in Inglewood with the team. Round21.com very proudly is going to be releasing some new drops with Paige Beckers and the UConn women's basketball team, as well as some very exciting Black Friday new news. And so there's a little tiny be the first in the know at the bottom of our website, round21.com. And that will be the way to be first on the VIP list to know what's happening. But this year with the WNBA being able to represent all of the players, both Caitlin Clark and Asia Wilson, as well as so many others, in addition to partnerships with the NFLPA and having collectibles featuring Patrick Mahomes and some of the other players that bring us to our feet. It's just been an incredible way for fans today to have an alternative fashion sense for sports that really puts the message of the people first in formation with the teams and leagues that they love.
Well, congratulations on all the great work that you are doing, and make sure you check out Jasmine's Instagram page and her website to be in the know.